Welcome back to Make Your Move Mondays. I'm Elizabeth Henson, and this is Jared Richardson, and we have a special guest today, Leah Morgan.
Thanks for having me.
This week we have Leah as our special guest. She is an off-the-grid property specialist.
Good morning.
So tell us a little bit about your real estate history.
I started working for Richardson Real Estate in 2009, so I've been doing about 15 years.
Okay, that's quite a while. So to start out, I want you to tell us a little bit about what off-the-grid properties are and what classifies something as off-the-grid.
Okay. Generally speaking, an off-the-grid property is classified as a property that does not have electric run, like typical electric run to the property, or like city water or gas or something like that.
Okay. And what is your history with off-the-grid properties? How did you get into listing and selling those, and have you ever lived on off-the-grid properties?
Okay. Well, here in this area, they're pretty common. There's a lot of areas that doesn't have electric run to it, and so over the years, we pretty often have houses listed that are considered off the grid or off the grid land for sale. So over the years, we have dealt with them pretty often.
Okay.
So I actually live in an off the grid property as well. So our house is completely run by solar and gravity spring water. So.
Okay, so Leah, what is your reasoning for living off the grid? Are there benefits, or what is your reasoning?
Well, we like the idea of just kind of being independent. Self-sufficient, yeah. And it's a really neat concept. And so the property that we decided to move to actually does not have electricity close by to hook onto. So it's really our only option if we were going to live there. So we set up a new solar panels with batteries and got our water hooked up to a spring.
Which brings me to a question that I've been thinking about: is where would someone go to get these supplies to set up something like that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. You can get most of your off-the-grid solar, like if you're going to do solar, you can get most of that online. Pretty much anything you would need to set up an off-the-grid property, you can purchase online. There are also some stores that sell off-the-grid stuff, but not close by here. So most people buy theirs online.
So if I was a person that had bought an existing home or have an existing home and I'm wanting to turn it into an off-the-grid piece of property, what are some tips as far as where do I start looking? Are there even YouTube videos to kind of tell me how to set up my home, or where would you start at?
For sure. Yeah, there's a lot of online information for off-the-grid. It's pretty common these days. A lot of people are getting into that. But yeah, YouTube is a good place to start to just kind of learn about the different types of systems and maybe the one that might work best for you. Every property is different and every setup's a little bit different. So it just kind of depends on what you're looking for. And so yeah, I would definitely recommend starting online and just kind of doing some research. There's lots of different types of off the grid. I mean, you can do solar, you can run off generator, you can run off, there's different like wind power, water wheels. A lot of people use those in this area. But the most common is for sure solar. And but you can pretty much learn anything about those systems on YouTube. And I definitely recommend doing that before you kind of get into trying to
know what you're getting into.
Yeah, so you actually kind of understand how the system works.
Right.
And going into it with just kind of knowing, what you need and how it goes from like the panels to the batteries to your running your house.
Right. So. And another question that I know some probably have is how to obtain financing for one of these off-the-grid piece of properties. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. I definitely recommend going to like a local bank. Wherever if you're looking to purchase an off-the-grid property here in this area, to go to our local hometown bank and just talk to them, let them know what you're wanting to do, and just ask them if they're willing to work with you on whatever the plan is. Generally speaking, they will. Each situation is different, but generally speaking, they will consider financing on an off-the-grid property. It's just a lot of times they will require like more of a down payment than they would a normal residential on-the-grid home. So a lot of times they'll want 10 to 15% down payment for a normal conventional residential home, whereas off the grid they're going to ask you for 30 to 40% down, generally speaking.
Now, Leah, tell me, if I'm somebody, I live, let's say I live in the city, and I know I've dealt with folks in the past, if they just say, you know what, I'm done. I just don't want to live this way. I want to start finding me a property, move out the country, and I want to try off the grid living. So if they come to you and they say, Leah, I'm looking for a property. I want to be off the grid. I prefer not to have many neighbors. What would you do? How would you find them that property? What do they look for in a property to support them on off the grid?
That's a very good question. Well, first of all, I recommend looking for properties that have a water source, because that's going to be something that's really important when you're doing off the grid, because you're not going to have the city water available, generally speaking. So you do need to keep that in mind. So different water sources would be, well water, of course, and then a spring, some sort of fresh water coming out of the ground. Or some people do rain catchment. I'm not super familiar with that, but I think the most common would be like spring water or well water.
Lee, I know that, and of course I grew up on well. I know I had my grandfather and some other places, they had spring water, and it really doesn't take much of a spring to create a good water source. I know they basically had a hillside that had a seep in it and made a little dam there with mortar or blocks or whatever it may be, and then put a pipe in it and run it into, say, a 500-gallon spring box, and that's giving the pressure to the house. And so it really doesn't take a lot to create a water source for your home. It doesn't have to be one of these big free-flowing springs, even though they're real nice, but it don't have to be that.
That's right. To run just a normal-sized household, you really don't need much, as long as you can get like constant water flow is really what's important. Mm-hmm. And yeah, you can create a spring box and do gravity fed is ideal for off the grid, because then otherwise you have to use a pump of some kind.
We're talking about financing, and then of course kind of finding your property. Now, when you borrow the money for a traditional loan, a traditional home, they require you to have insurance, and most of the time it's not an issue to get it. Now, if I'm purchasing a off-the-grid property, and that is my choice the way I'm going to live, is it more difficult to get insurance on off-the-grid versus a traditional home? If not, is there a price difference, or what can you tell us about that?
Well, generally speaking, no, it's not more difficult to get insurance on an off-the-grid home. There is one thing you really do have to be careful with, and that is wood heat. A lot of insurance companies, they don't mind if you have wood heat, but they want the stove to be installed properly and the pipes to be done safely. So I've seen some off-the-grid properties over the years where they had the pipes like running out of window, or just kind of cutting a hole in the wall and not properly done in a safe way where there's not a chance of a fire starting or something like that. So as long as that is done properly, I've not run into any type of issues with getting insurance.
Yeah, I've run into that with traditional homes that actually had wood heat, and they were concerned with it.
Yeah,
So
just
you can run into that on anything that it sounds like.
yeah. Well, out here we don't have any type of restrictions or anything like that, so people kind of just throw things in a lot of times.
So if you're living off the grid, you're not going to have an inspector coming out
Right.
to redo it. It's just going to be at your own risk.
Mhm.
So, of course, certainly if you're going to do that, you want to do it properly and get a professional that knows what they're doing.
And that kind of brings me to another thing with off the grid, just different types of heat sources, because you want to think about your electric and what system you're going to use to run your home off of, the water source, and then also the heat source. When you're building a home, or if you're looking at an existing home, what kind of heat system are you going to put in? There's several different ones that people generally use.
Okay, and I'm going to cut you off. I'm going to ask you. You're talking about heat. What about cooling? What if I want, I like the idea off the grid.
That's just as important.
But at the same time, I like to go over my thermostat and cut it up or down if I'm hot or cold.
I hear you.
So if it's 90 degrees, and so what am I mean? I know you're not going to run a 2.5 ton unit on.
Generally speaking, no.
Okay, but anyway, so
that was something that I really
to cut you off.
No, that's a good question.
Just kind of popped in my mind.
Yeah, so when we moved from our traditional home that was on the grid to the off the grid property, that was one thing I was like, I have to have air conditioning. I'm not going to live in the 20th century without air conditioning.
Right.
21st century, actually. But anyway, so yeah, generally speaking, you can't run your normal conventional central heat and air off of your solar. It pulls too much energy, and if you're looking to run everything else in your house plus your air conditioning, generally speaking, it's not going to keep up. So a lot of people are going with those mini splits. Excuse me, they're very energy efficient. So that's a good option. We use just window units in our house, and our system runs it just fine in the summertime. We usually have lots of sunshine. So we just run ours. I usually start it in the afternoon, run it during the night while we're sleeping, and then a lot of times the house stays cool during the day, and I kind of shut it off for a little while and let the batteries charge up. Generally speaking, for off the grid, the normal heat sources would be wood heat. That's something that's, most people, if you live off the grid, you're going to have firewood available. So that's what a lot of people use. But there's a few others that people are using these days that seem to work pretty well.
So, Leah, a concern for some people might be that there's not enough people around that can work on off-the-grid properties or help you set up off-the-grid properties. Tell me a little bit about that. Is that a concern?
Yeah, definitely. It's something that you do need to think about when purchasing an existing home that has solar or is off the grid, or even if you're looking to just purchase land and set up your own. Unless you are, knowledgeable in doing it yourself, you do need to check into finding somebody local that can keep your system maintained or, get it set up for you. Because there is maintenance involved in having a solar system or an off-the-grid system. So here in this area in Perry County, there are people that are very knowledgeable in that area, and I can help people get in contact with people that can help them stay on the grid and keep their systems maintained if they're already established, and also get you set up.
What are some things to look for as far as if I'm a buyer going and I'm interested in looking at off-the-grid properties or just land? What are some important things that I need to be looking for?
I always recommend, if you're just looking for like an off-the-grid property to kind of start your own thing, I always recommend that people look for a property. Most people are looking for privacy, and a lot of the off-the-grid properties that are in this area, they're kind of difficult to get to. And so you need to really pay attention to the access to your property. You'll see a lot of properties listed online that are considered off the grid. And the property may be nice and have everything that you are looking for in the property, but the access to it may not be ideal. So you really need to check into that before you purchase something. I highly recommend people actually go to the property themselves and look at what the access is like, and just make sure that the road is it's like a deeded easement, a legal easement, where whatever properties you're crossing over, the neighbors aren't going to like block you out, pick it up, and tell you you can't access your property.
So Leah, I appreciate you joining us today. Again, Leah is our off-the-grid specialist. How do people get in contact with you if they're looking to buy or sell?
You can find me on our website, and my cell phone number is 931-299-0300.
So if you're interested in buying or selling off the grid, or Leah really handles anything else too, give her a call. She's a great member of our team. We're excited to have her today. And thank you for joining us on this episode of Make Your Move Mondays. As always, you can find us on RichardSonREsales.com. Give us a call at 931-589-2455.